when we read the Bible, we see that there's something going on merely than just what's in front of us, that we can touch and feel and smell and hear and all this stuff. There's always something more. There's this other layer to the tapestry of creation that's always being tugged on.
Yeah.
And so when we come into the modern world and we think that all these things are new, but they're really not, they're just named different things now. Instead of an apparition, it's a ghost. And instead of like, the beast of Dejuma or whatever. Gévaudan. I got it. I was so close. It's Bigfoot, all these different things. And we come in and we say, maybe those people just weren't stupid. Maybe they were just also Christians living in the world that God made, trying to make sense of all the different cast of characters that he's put in. And the Bible nowhere claims to say that it's a taxonomy of every single thing in creation. Mm-hmm. But it does say that there are parts of creation that we're less privy to, but that we still are a part of. And so we should try to investigate those things. And I think that looking into the things unseen is a good way to start addressing that.
In other words, maybe this guy Patrick really did drive the snakes out of Ireland. Is that kind of what I hear you saying? Maybe that actually did occur.
Yeah.
Not even maybe.
Yeah,
definitely.
It's like it's confirmed. Yeah, maybe when we tend to look through history through our current lens, I mean, what Lewis talked about is chronological snobbery, that we tend to just basically import all of our baseline assumptions and presuppositions and assume that they're true without investigation, without confirming or arguing for them, and then sifting the past through the lens of those presuppositions. And when you do that with a modern materialist lens, materialism as not like I love stuff too much, but the belief that the world is just stuff, that it's just floating around atoms and quarks and molecules, and there's no supernatural beyond the natural. If you assume that and then you look back through the past, what option do you have but to say that every story of possession, that every story of gods coming down and interacting with man, or every story of some kind of seemingly preternatural creature wreaking havoc on a village, you have to say, oh, those old peasants, those illiterate peasants, they still thought that the earth was at the center of the universe. Mm-hmm. And, and they still thought the earth was flat, even though most of them actually from ancient times had calculated the circumference of the earth already, But we tend to do that with materialism. And one of the things we're aiming to push back on is say, as this subject explodes in popularity, a lot of non-Christians are saying, wow, what if there is such thing as a paranormal world? And Christians have shrunk back. And what we think instead is we should be charging in and saying, yes, there is a supernatural world. I'm a Christian. Let me tell you about the nature of this supernatural world. Let me see you protected, inoculated with truth against the schemes and deceits of real, ancient, undying, malevolent, supernatural beings who are bent on your destruction, who hate God, and so hate him everywhere they see him, especially in the face of man, his image bearer. So we should expect in a supernatural world like the Bible describes for these supernatural beings to be attempting to take people captive. And they're doing it very successfully right now in the paranormal media realm. So we were convinced, even if Christians, maybe they won't get it right away, let's try to show them how a Christian might be interested in this topic, but not interested in it in an unhealthy way or in a way that would cede truth to that interest, if that makes sense.
Yeah, in terms of a witness, like an evangelistic opportunity, I do want the non-Christian to realize that when they feel hatred towards the cynical, materialist atheists in the world, they're right. Their view is bankrupt.
Yeah.
The materialism is just, it can offer you nothing. There's nothing true about it. I want them to know that they're right to feel that way. And then I want them to know what to do about it. And so it's sort of drawing people in to show them, no, actually, there really is something here. And here's what you should think about it. And then for a Christian witness, to existing believers, the light bulb that can go off in someone's mind when you present them with a copy of Homer's Iliad and you say something like, this is myth and it's also history. This is something that probably happened. There's nothing in the Bible that precludes the Iliad just happening, being real, being oral tradition that's passed down of something real.
Yeah, history warped through mythology.
Exactly. And the light bulb that goes off in people's minds when they're already Christians and they hear you say that, it wakes people up to appreciating this theater of God's glory in creation more. And I think that's good, because the other thing that materialism does is it makes Christians balk at the materialism, and they sort of retreat into this, just like, I can only appreciate God, and I can't appreciate anything that God made. I can't say that that mountain is good or that it reflects something true. And that's just not how the Bible talks. The Bible constantly is talking about things in the world to help us realize the glory and the beauty of the one that made it. And so, especially in the Reformed tradition and the Protestant tradition, I want to reclaim that.
A couple things came to mind listening to you guys articulate that together. Number one, there's really not much difference outside of one still claims a link to the transcendent between a lot of today's what I like to call Pottery Barn, evangelical suburban megachurches who, self-edit the scriptures into what can be absorbed in a 22-minute sermon every week, and practice their own form of philosophical reductionism, because many of the same instincts to not sound weird, to not sound crazy. We're not cuckoo, okay? We don't act out, in the cringy ways that, that people are stereotypically opposed to Christianity. That's kind of the same intellectual snobbery of the materialist that you just described. And since that first group is what is foremost at the forefront of engaging American culture today, is this style of church and worship, that gets to my second point listening to you guys. It does seem kind of counterintuitive to say we're seeker-friendly and we represent a worldview whose origin, whose genesis is that a supernatural transcendent being reached his hand literally down into human history to take himself in human form, okay, who was dead, wrapped up in burial cloth, dead as a doornail after he'd been tortured beyond recognition and then dead, and rolled behind a 2-ton stone, and then supernaturally moved into history to remove that stone and raise himself literally back to life. And like a boss, walk out of there like nothing happened. And then his apostles went out and did these like super miraculous acts with his spirit, like speaking other people's native languages in order to communicate his message to them. It does seem kind of counterintuitive to call yourself seeker-friendly, and your worldview begins with those supernatural claims. But by the way, this entire supernatural arena over here that more people are interested in America maybe than they have been since the Spiritism craze of the late 19th and early 20th century, I've got nothing for that. We got nothing. But I do have this 22-minute sermon on how you can have a better manicured lawn. I've got that for you. Thoughts? It does seem a little counterintuitive, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's this great Mott and Bailey that the evangelical church pulls, where they're like welcoming everybody in. They're saying like, "Hey, we're cool. We're actually trying to appeal to the same audience that the materialist is trying to appeal to, which is just the broad audience of the world, the so-called enlightened people that walk the earth nowadays." And they're trying to draw them in and saying like, "We got great tips for your marriage, for your finances, for your job, for all these things." And then one of them says, "Well, what about the part where God becomes a man and he raises from the dead, dies, first of all," great point, and then like comes back to life again. What about that? And they're like, "Oh yeah, we'll get there on Easter. We'll get there when we get." But really, I just want you to focus on how much we can help you with your finances and your marriage and your friendships. It's deception.
Well, it's the classic evangelical craving for respectability.
Yep.
And this is something that the scriptures warn us about. We shouldn't seek to be, our selling point shouldn't be, hey, we're respectable. And by that, we mean all of the ways that you validate intelligence and truthfulness.
Unoffensive is basically what respectable means nowadays. Yes.
Right. We're that. And instead, we should be front loading like the Lord and his apostles did, often front loading all of the reasons why you shouldn't follow me.
Yeah.
Hey, follow me. And do you want to be crucified? Because follow me. Do you want to die every day?
Do you want a bed to sleep in?
Don't follow me. Like,
yes, I'm not your guy.
Yeah.
Do you want to? And in today's parlance, there's obviously always this we're crucifying the flesh with its passions and desires. But there's also an element today where a lot are institutional from the level of public education on up. We have an institutional materialism baked into our culture, where we've attempted in all of our higher education and public schooling to basically say, you are matter descended from other matter. You are an animal descended from animals. You come from nothing. You're going nowhere. by the way, there's no meaning in the universe other than that which you fabricate for yourself out of your own whims and intuitions. And it's infinitely, of course, that's infinitely malleable. You can be a man or a woman, you can be whatever you want to be. But ultimately, it's just this sort of reader response universe. You make up your own meaning. And Christians ought to be charging into that and saying, no. The universe was breathed out by a creator who had a purpose for every atom of it, including you. You exist for something. You're not an infinitely malleable lump of human clay that you get to be your own God. God actually has authority over you and demands your worship and obedience. But by the way, if you will worship him, you'll find that that's what you were for in the first place. And there will be glory and joy. And so when it comes to the supernatural in particular, Christians should be front loading and saying, oh yeah, you live in a supernatural world. Mm-hmm. All those aliens things, don't fall for that, by the way. Those are the demons. All the ghosts, that's not grandpa.
That's not your grandma.
It's not grandma. That's a demon. And Christians should be charging in and just owning what the world would look at as totally not respectable. Because their worldview is actually bankrupt of respectability against the measure of real truth.
Yeah, I mean, our 100%. Church fathers were accused of being cannibals, sadistics, for practicing communion. He said to eat of his flesh, these are cannibals. They're polytheists. I mean, they were accused of all the unreasonable terms of that era. And we do everything in our era to run away from being seen as unreasonable with an unreasonable world as absolutely possible. I've got 1 minute before this first break, and so I'm going to ask a really difficult question to answer in 1 minute, okay? How do you make sure you guys stay on the narrow road while broadcasting such material? That's my struggle every day doing this. I'm live from the narrow road, but the Blaze expects me to have a broad audience, okay? And so we discuss this as a staff all the time, that tension. But this subject matter, this exists existentially daily. How do you stay centered?
Two things. One is the proper ordering of your loves. You should love God more than Bigfoot. You should be more interested in the Lord than Bigfoot. You should be interested in Bigfoot, but not too much. So if you care more about, the haunted graveyard in your town than you do about your daily devotions and prayers, you're doing a really bad job of that first thing. So that's number one. Number two is Reformed confessionalism. Submitting yourself to the Reformed doctrinal work of your spiritual forefathers like the Westminster Assembly. Reading the Westminster Confession of Faith, anywhere you have exceptions, sure, you can note something and have a good reason for it. But overall, being able to say yes and amen to all of this. This is the tradition that I'm a part of. This is the history and the faith and the religion that I adhere to. That provides you with a fence of orthodoxy.
Yeah.
And within that fence, there's a rich field that you can graze in, like the good sheep that you are. And so when you have that fence and you start to graze in the field, you realize quickly that there's parts of the field where the grass has grown quite tall. And so you can safely enjoy those things so long as you're within this fence line of orthodoxy. And when you start to butt up against the fence, well, then it's time to, step back and reassess and maybe go the other direction for a while.